So this is the way we usually start out to give some context for everything else. Can you take us to a time, and maybe it was recent, when you thought, I don't know if I'm going to be able to keep doing the thing that I do anymore? You know, like this industry can't support me, or I can't continue in the way that I've wanted to do this.
Those thoughts have been creeping in for me a little bit more lately. And, you know, well, part of me recognizes that I am like, it's a good sign. And I feel very like privileged and lucky to have not had those thoughts creeping in for the last like 5 years since I kind of left a full-time job. But, you know, we can talk a little bit about the larger context of the podcast industry. But, you know, it rode this roller coaster. And I have had a number of moments of thinking that, you know, the bottom of the roller coaster is done and it just keeps grinding along at the bottom. And so when I think about the sort of big picture, that's where those thoughts creep in. But, you know, if I quickly remind myself that like my hustle now is the same as it's kind of was a year ago, 2 years ago, 3 years ago, then, you know, then I get a little perspective. But it's hard not to let the kind of like larger, especially if you're, you know, in media or creative work in general, it's really hard to not let that larger kind of disintegration just like get to you. Yeah.
You were at a lot of really stable places that people think of as huge institutions, ESPN, NPR. Did you end up going independent because you were ready to sort of leave that grind of jumping from ship to ship, or was it just a decrease in the amount of opportunities available on that side?
It was probably just a little burnout. I mean, I was at, you know, first off, we should have the conversation about whether NPR counts as stable anymore.
I was actually going to jump in there and be like, even does ESPN
and even ESPN, right?
Anymore?
I mean, I think I caught the kind of like tail end of a moment when there was a lot of investment in media and new media. And then I think I moved on right in a moment where things were shuffling around. I could feel that instability. And obviously the pandemic accelerated that a lot. And so I left ESPN. I sort of bounced around under the larger umbrella of ESPN. I did FiveThirtyEight, which is Nate Silver's data journalism site that was owned, that weird moment when it was owned by, of all places, ESPN. And then I did 30 for 30, this, you know, sports documentary series, and I did the audio arm for that. For a while I was doing both, which was just like peak burnout, peak like trying to make cool stuff, but also trying to just navigate like the corporate world that it just comes with working for Disney. And so it was largely speaking, Mike, to your point, like it was largely speaking just like feeling burnout and feeling a little bit of, you know, I spent a lot of my time at ESPN trying to both make cool stuff, but also like be a champion for audio, especially ambitious audio. And 30 for 30 was a great calling card for that. And I think I kind of reached a point where like I was laying out like big visions for like other stuff we could make. We kind of made the hardest thing first, which was these like super long, difficult documentaries. And I spent like a year basically like pitching around a vision for like an audio division at ESPN that was not just sports talk, but it wasn't all 30 for 30 stuff. And that just wasn't going anywhere. And I kind of like had a couple conversations and just came to understand like the status quo is going to be the status quo, which was great, you know, making 30 for 30s, but that was also very stressful and hard. And the management side of it, you know, I'll cop to that being like one of the hardest, you know, very hard, and probably the places where I fell short the most. So going into the beginning of 2020, I like, you know, parted ways, and obviously didn't know what 2020 was going to be at that point. Right. And so I kind of like, I would say in retrospect, went into freelance world actually for me, you know, at a pretty good time when like podcasting was taking off. I was able to find work. I didn't have to manage a team through the pandemic, which, you know, when I'm in my kind of most like selfish moments, I'm like, gosh, I'm really glad I didn't have to manage a team of 8 through the pandemic. But, you know, that's a long-winded answer to your question.
To follow up on the thing you just tossed off when we started talking, which is, you know, I kind of asked me again in 6 months.
Yeah.
About whether or not I think I can keep doing what I love doing. It was 6 months of a number you pulled out of a hat, or is there a 6 months thing that's happening?
Yeah,
Or is that
no.
just your timeline for like, I reassess in 6 months?
Yeah, and I'd be curious to hear your thoughts on this, but that's like roughly the sort of life cycle that I think of. I think of it, seasons, and I think of like, sort of spring and fall as kind of like the only seasons when things actually get done, and so just the sort of like rhythm of projects, I just kind of tend to think of like in half years. I'm pretty good with spreadsheets, but I'm not like looking at a spreadsheet that says I'm out of money in 6 months. I mostly just have that kind of like spidey sense of like, okay, I need a couple more things on my plate come the second half of this year. And then stuff generally in my world tends to take, a quarter to a half of a year to sort of really coalesce. And so that's when I start to just like think about stuff. So we're recording this dead of summer, I think my fall is kind of set, and I'm starting to think a little bit like, okay, come winter, what could go, or what could like extend, or so forth. And the other kind of related thing to what you're saying is, mostly speaking, over the last 5 years, I have tended to take on like projects that are going to have a like end. Like I'm going to help you make this show for. It's an 8-part thing, or I'm going to like help you develop the show. We're going to make the first season, then I'll hand it back to you or whatever. And so, things naturally have a kind of like 4 to 8 month arc in the stuff that I've taken on.
We have talked to quite a few people who have gone from, corporate structure to indie, especially in media. And there's sort of like a spectrum of people who really want the industry to restabilize so they can go back to that structure. And then people who really enjoy the creative freedom, like you just mentioned, and being able to make what you want to make. But of course, that comes with a lot more risk and a lot more stress because it's a lot of times it's just you. When you're re-evaluating after these periods, I mean, which way which part of the spectrum do you fall on?
Yeah, I talk to people all the time, and this is one of the first things I ask them. It's like, if you want a capital J job and that's who you are and that's your goal, like that's really good self-awareness, and you just got to work back towards that. I have found I'm basically allergic to like a corporate environment at this point. Like I know people use that euphemistically, but like there are moments when I'm like on a Zoom call and I see the like people I'm working with, and I see the bureaucracy on the outside edges of the Zoom box, and I actually kind of tense up.
Wow.
And I think I can do that. I think I'm pretty good at it, and I certainly think I'm better at it than I maybe was at one time. But the times when I've sort of brushed up against that, I'm actually happen to be in a moment right now where I'm like maybe might take on something for like a year and a half that is like probably the most kind of like corporate thing I would have taken on in a while. And the moments where I'm like writing memos and scheduling meetings and all that stuff, it's like physically like off-putting. But sometimes you have to just eat something you're slightly allergic to.
It's
for nourishment. But wait, I want to hear about you guys. I mean, do you feel that way too? Do you like actually?
I'll dive in because I've had corporate jobs. I mean, I worked at fucking Time Magazine.
Yeah.
Right. Like I was like a editor at Time Magazine. That's probably the most corporate job I've ever had. Actually, that's not true. I had a period between .com where I was, I worked at AOL in a very junior position. I was in charge of one of their city pages. Like, do you remember this in early .com when everyone was like, we're going to do city directories? Like,
wow. That sounds familiar. I don't remember.
Y'all are too young. Whether or not I want to do a corporate job, I am not good at it.
Yeah.
That's what I would say. Like, I go through periods of really missing the stability. And I did have a job that actually combined the best of both worlds when I worked at MTV. Yeah. Like, I was a reporter and, on-camera person, which also stories to tell about being an on-camera person, which Jody probably brushed up against the people. Once people start treating you as talent, it's a very weird situation.
Yeah.
I don't think it's good for people.
It's good for it's good for their checking account.
It's good for their checking account, but it's not good to have like a whole staff of people who are their job is to make you feel good.
Yeah.
Like it's bad for your brain, I feel like. But anyway, I didn't have that as much as some people, but that was a really wonderful environment. And of course, that whole department got killed. So I did have like a chance to ride a unicorn, I guess.
Right.
But now a couple things, which is, although I can get I have something that they call sometimes in recovery circles, euphoric recall.
Wow.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Which is like, oh man. And it is a little bit like remembering like the good times of drinking, like, oh, it was all great. And I had only good times and not remembering like all the crashes and the hangovers. Right. But I also know that if I got that kind of job again, it would, I'll stick to I don't think I'm good at it.
Yeah. Well, that's good. That's very important.
I think I could be better at it today than I was because I've grown up a little bit. But
yeah.
I know, Mike.
What's
ahead.
your taste for the corporate structure?
So
you love a standing meeting? I know you love a standing meeting.
He shows up for ours.
I do. I try. Yeah. My experience is kind of weird anyway, because I've been a creative pretty much my entire adult life. And musically, primarily, I've always been indie. I've never had the corporate major label experience in music, but I've done television stuff where I was talent, but I was also, co-creator, executive producer, like sold projects and was able to be like the face of them in a very corporate environment. And when I reflect back on that, it's like, I wouldn't mind being in that environment in a talent capacity where it wasn't my heart and soul in the creative, because that business is just so cold and inhuman when it comes to, how it treats the stuff that's so precious precious from people. So I'm not sure I'm cut out for that part.
Yeah.
But, if somebody want to hire me to host a late night show,
right.
I'll do that.
Yeah.
I'll do that.
Yeah. And, that often, of course, comes with it. Like, you get hired for the cool talent thing, but then inevitably there's going to be standing meetings, and I was talking to someone the other day about, not from like a work environment, but I'm actually realizing it kind of connects to what we're talking about here. But I was talking to someone about how, like, I run in kind of lefty, creative, weirdo circles, but I'm like pretty normie kind of person. And like I was saying, like, I really like that. I like being the most normal person in the weird scene. Like if I'm the weird one, if I'm the strange one, then something's wrong, right? But that's always just been where I'm felt most comfortable. I have kind of relatively more normie tendencies. I think I'm like less wildly creative than a lot of people I hang out with and like. But it applies to this in that, like, I'm kind of good at spreadsheets and I kind of like doing budgets and I'm like have a capacity for that. But I would rather be the person who has the capacity for that in the like freelance slumming it world than be just another person who's like chugging away at that as a cog in a corporate machine, like that's that sort of, I want to be the most normal guy in the weirdo world as opposed to just an interesting person in a very normie world. I don't know if that makes sense.
I love that. I absolutely love that.